Imagine you just woke up. Before you even sit up, a thought sneaks into your mind without knocking. Why does my body know I woke up before I know? Congratulations. You've already started your day doing the most powerful thing in the world, asking a stupid question. And stupid questions are pure gold. The greatest scientists live off them. There's a trick that separates people who truly learn from people who only pretend to be learning. And it's not just asking stupid questions. It's building a toy model before attacking any topic. A ridiculously simple, almost childish version of the idea. If the subject is quantum mechanics, imagine coins, boxes, and flashlights. If it's economics, play with buckets of water and faucets. The mind loves getting lost in complexity, so you force it to understand the essence first. Have you ever wondered why most people spend their entire lives merely reacting instead of consciously choosing what to think? Because while the human mind is a fascinating machine, it's also lazy. It loves repeating patterns, believing its own stories, and above all, it hates being questioned. Think about how many brilliant ideas have passed through your mind, only for that inner voice to whisper, "This is impossible. Give up." All of this happens because of beliefs. The ones you absorb without noticing when you're still small, while the world tells you what is possible and what isn't. As a child, you heard that money is hard to earn, that some people are born smart, that making mistakes is shameful. You heard that math is difficult, and your brain, which still doesn't know how to filter anything, simply records it. That's the problem. What you accept too early becomes what you defend for the rest of your life. Beliefs create the map of your world. And the most curious thing is that once this map is drawn, most people stop exploring. They walk in circles inside the same mental borders and call that reality. But the truth is, the map is not the territory. You don't live the world as it is. You live the world as you believe it is. Pay attention now. When someone tells you, "That's impossible," what they're really saying is, "That's impossible according to my mental map." But your map can be different. And this is where the fun begins, when you realize you can redraw your internal borders. Now imagine a topic that has been blocking you. Instead of drowning in piles of pages, stop and do this. Describe the problem in one clear sentence. Create a simple everyday scene that represents it. Explain it as if you were teaching it to a child who just arrived in the world. Done. You just built your first mental prototype. Now comes the step that boosts your ability to learn and act. Every extra detail must ask for permission to enter your model. Ask it what role it plays, what phenomenon it explains that your prototype still doesn't, and what practical consequence it brings to your life. If it can't answer, it stays out. This radical filter saves attention, reduces noise, and accelerates your reasoning. It's personal development applied to the root of your thinking. Want to level up your mental power? Make the model testable. Bring it into real life. If the topic is attention, turn it into a simple experiment. One goal, timed work blocks, short planned breaks. If the topic is memory, test active recall by speaking out loud what you just studied while walking. If it's creativity, impose a constraint and generate multiple solutions in a short burst. Testable models create feedback loops, and feedback loops create consistent performance, the kind that doesn't depend on your mood. Now here's a detail almost no one notices. The same method applies to habits, purpose, and decisions. Want more energy during the day? Model your day like a circuit with inputs and outputs. Which inputs energize you? Which outputs drain you? Where are the leaks? Want to make better decisions? Model each decision like a game of hypotheses and scenarios, and ask which option survives the worst plausible outcome. You're not just learning a topic, you're training your mind to think like a full-time scientist. Now let me ask you something. Are you still the kind of person who believes what others told you to believe? Or have you started discovering what you actually believe? Maybe you think you've already started forming your own beliefs, but your subconscious hasn't. And here's the paradox. Only those who recognize their own ignorance are able to start thinking for real. No one is stupid because they don't know something. People become stupid when they stop wanting to understand. That's the moment the mind freezes, when pride replaces curiosity. And that's why so many people spend their entire lives collecting information but never developing wisdom. Being able to repeat something is not the same as understanding it. Most people memorize quotes, concepts, theories, and call that knowledge. But true learning begins when you can explain something complex so simply that even a child understands it. That's where genius lives. Clarity is the sound of truth. When you understand something deeply, the mental noise disappears. Ideas flow, thoughts align. The chaos inside your head turns into structure. And here's the fascinating part. Most people run from simplicity because they confuse simplicity with superficiality. But simplicity is not the beginning of intelligence, it's the final stage. Reaching it requires walking through the maze of confusion, doubt, and contradiction. Ask yourself right now, do you actually understand what you believe? Or do you just believe what you half understood? This is the question that separates those who think for themselves from those who simply repeat inherited thoughts. A mind that thinks clearly is never afraid to dismantle its own ideas. It wants to see what's left when the ego is removed from the equation. And here's one of the most powerful secrets of the human mind. Deep understanding is the antidote to fear. Fear feeds on what you don't understand. What is clear doesn't scare you. What is understood doesn't control you. The more you understand, the less power the world has over you. So whenever something feels too confusing, don't run. Investigate. Turn every "I don't get it" into an invitation. Ask, question, doubt. Because the true wise person isn't the one who collects answers. It's the one who cultivates the kind of questions that expand consciousness. Curiosity is the fuel of a free mind. It's the fire that moves people who refuse to settle for the obvious. People who look at the world and ask, why is this like this and not some other way? But curiosity lives on a dangerous border because every discovery begins as an act of mental rebellion. From childhood, you're taught to look for answers. No one teaches you how to ask better questions. And that's where intellectual mediocrity is born, when you get used to living inside other people's answers. Think carefully. Every major human breakthrough in science, in art, in philosophy began with someone daring to ask an uncomfortable question. Questions that sounded stupid, dangerous, even heretical. But that's how progress happens. When doubt wins over obedience. Doubt is sacred. It destroys illusions, challenges certainties, and forces the mind to see what was hidden. It's the hammer that cracks the shell of your convictions to reveal what's alive inside them. And if you have the courage to doubt yourself, your ideas, your fears, congratulations. You're already light years ahead of most people. There's something magical about living in a state of curiosity. You stop seeing the world as a closed manual and start seeing it as an open experiment. Imagine your mind as a satellite dish. The more curious it is, the bigger the signal. The more indifferent it is, the weaker the reception. Curiosity is the most underestimated intellectual force in the world. People treat it as nice to have, when in truth, if you don't have it, you've already lost. And the best part is this. Curiosity isn't magic. Isn't talent, isn't a gift. It's method, it's training, it's your attitude toward reality. Pay close attention now, because this is key. True curiosity begins with a tiny discomfort, a small friction between reality and your ignorance. You notice something and think, why does this happen like that? And that's where most minds die, because instead of investigating, they shrug and move on. But the learning mind thinks, it makes no sense to live in a universe that works like this and not know why. It's almost a childish indignation, and childish here is a compliment. Curiosity becomes performance when you treat it like an experiment, not an emotion. Take any topic in your daily life and make a list of ridiculous questions about it. Ridiculous question. Why does boiling water make that sound? Why does a remote control work from far away? Why do some people fail to understand simple instructions? They sound absurd, but they force your brain out of autopilot and into investigative mode. It's not about the question, It's about the mental state it triggers. Formulate absurdly simple hypotheses. Don't look for the perfect explanation. Look for a possible explanation. Then try to test it quickly, even imperfectly. Curiosity without testing becomes fantasy. Curiosity with testing becomes learning. Now imagine adopting this style in your daily life. Every conversation becomes a lab. Every news headline becomes a hypothesis. Every frustration becomes a question. You stop looking for ready-made answers and start searching for causes, mechanisms, principles. Your mind becomes deeper and lighter at the same time. And this type of behavior, repeated day after day, transforms not just your learning, but who you are when you think. Curiosity bypasses perfectionism, because when you're curious, you're not trying to prove you're smart, you're trying to discover. And that creates a rare kind of mental freedom, the kind that lets you study without pressure, observe without fear, experiment without shame. Curiosity is the purest form of intellectual courage. Now pause for a moment. How many times have you stopped yourself from taking action because you wanted certainty? The truth is this: certainty is an addiction. People don't search for truth, they search for comfort. But intellectual comfort is the enemy of evolution. You don't need safety to think. You need the courage to not know. Want to change your life? Then change your repetitions. Replace "this won't work" with "how can I make this work?" Replace self-criticism with curiosity. Replace rushing with attention. Each of these substitutions rewires real neural pathways, as if you were redrawing the electrical roots of your own mind. Your brain is a laboratory, not a library. It doesn't want you to memorize. It wants you to experiment. It's through mistakes, doubts, and attempts that the mind learns to create new combinations. You don't learn by observing, you learn by interacting. And the more emotion you attach to something, the more your brain understands that it matters. That's why we remember moments of pain or euphoria and forget neutral days. The brain records what you feel. So if you want intense learning, feel what you're learning. Don't read about fire, touch the flame. Your brain is listening to you all the time. Every thought is a command, and with every command, it adjusts itself. You're not a prisoner of your neural connections. You're their architect, and the blueprint you're drawing right now will become the version of you that lives tomorrow. Everybody wants to get things right, but here's the irony. Nobody learns anything while they're getting it right. Success only confirms what you already know. Mistakes show you what you still need to understand. Want me to show you how to become more creative? Start by understanding that creativity isn't born when you try to force a brilliant idea. It's born when you allow ordinary ideas to collide. Those moments when you're doing something completely different, washing dishes, walking, taking a shower, and suddenly a good idea pops up. That's not magic. It's your brain finally having room to play with what it learned. So if you want to create, start collecting pieces, random things, simple details, silly observations. Write everything down. A weird noise from the fridge, a word someone said without thinking, a metaphor that makes no sense. Creativity doesn't come from emptiness, it comes from inventory. The more pieces you collect, the more combinations you can make. Now imagine you have a mental toolbox. Inside it, place questions that unlock new combinations. What if I flip this? What if I exaggerate it until it becomes ridiculous? What if I remove the most important part just to see what happens? What if I use this in a completely wrong context? These questions are cognitive screwdrivers. They loosen rigid ideas and give you access to the internal mechanics of your thinking. Another powerful method is the rule of creative restriction. It sounds counterintuitive, but the fewer resources you have, the more your brain is forced to improvise, and improvisation is the soil where creativity grows. Give yourself absurd limits. Create with only 2 colors, only 3 words, or only 1 concept. It's like tying your feet to train balance. It's uncomfortable at first, but performance explodes afterward. Now comes the fun part. Inspired by a playful experimental mindset, treat ideas like ugly prototypes. Stop waiting for perfection. Make ugly versions, quick versions, rough versions. Test them out loud, sketch badly, mix things without elegance. Ugly prototypes mean creativity is alive. Ideas that exist only in your imagination are intellectual cemeteries. A prototype, no matter how weird, gives your brain something real to refine. And here's the most neglected truth about creativity. Creativity requires tolerance for the ridiculous. You will think stupid things. You will make bad analogies. You will imagine solutions that seem like a crime against logic. Good. That means your mind is moving. Creativity dies in the fear of looking foolish. People who are afraid to explore never discover anything. And remember this, creativity is the daughter of curiosity, and curiosity is the daughter of intellectual freedom. When you allow yourself to think without forcing perfection, the brain relaxes, and when the brain relaxes, it creates. What people call inspiration is nothing more than the late reward of a mind that spent the whole day playing with the world. Creativity is not an event, it's a way of living. Now imagine something simple that almost nobody understands. Your brain does not work for you, it works to save energy. If you want to boost your cognitive performance in a brutally effective way, you must learn active recall. When you finish a study or creation block, close the material and reconstruct out loud what you just did. Your brain doesn't improve with passive training. It improves with active recovery. This small act of reconstruction doubles your understanding, increases retention, and creates connections that never appear through reading alone. It's neuroscience with humor and zero pretension. Here's another pillar. Most people try to manage time, but time without energy is useless. Understand your natural cycle. When are you most alert? When are you mentally slower? Don't fight your own rhythm. Put your hardest tasks in the hours when your mind is naturally sharper. That's strategic intelligence, not superstition. It's like launching a rocket at the exact minute when the wind helps, not hurts. Now let's talk about something almost no one does, but it transforms any ordinary brain into a reasoning machine. Complicate less, repeat better. Cognitive performance is not about knowing many things. It's about knowing a few essential things deeply. Smart repetition, spaced repetition, active repetition, divergent repetition, exploratory repetition. When you master the fundamentals, everything else falls into place. The brain loves patterns, and it rewards you when you truly understand them. And here comes the most fun and brutally true part. The brain only gets better when you put it under a little discomfort. Not emotional discomfort, cognitive discomfort. That moment when you think, I get it. That exact moment is where growth happens. Avoiding that feeling is like going to the gym and lifting only the weights you can lift while laughing. It's comfortable, but it builds nothing. So treat intellectual effort like physical training. Increase the load gradually, vary the stimulus, allow rest, and keep consistency. Your brain is plastic, adaptable, trainable. What feels impossible today becomes easy tomorrow, and becomes ordinary the day after that. Cognitive performance isn't a gift. It's the result of a training method that respects how the mind truly works, not the fantasies of instant motivation. Once you understand this, you stop asking your brain to be better and start teaching it to be better. Your brain works in cycles, not marathons. It thinks well in short bursts of high intensity, and then it needs restoration. The mistake most people make is trying to think for hours without stopping, as if productivity were something you could squeeze out with sheer willpower. It's not. Short, deep, intense sessions beat long, shallow effort every time. 30 minutes of deep focus are worth more than 3 hours of decorated distraction, falsely labeled productivity. Pay close attention now, because this is counterintuitive. Cognitive performance doesn't start when you do something hard. It starts when you reduce noise. The brain doesn't fail from lack of capacity. It fails from excess interference. It's like trying to hear beautiful music in the middle of a loud public square. Before turning up the volume, silence the square. And how do you silence the square? With deliberate focus. Ask yourself one single question before any mental work session. What do I want to exist at the end of this block of time? This tiny sentence is a cognitive laser. It aligns the brain, cuts distractions, forces clarity, and clarity is fuel for performance. A session without a question is a wasted session, like running without direction. It tires you out, but takes you nowhere. Remember, your brain does not work for you. It works to save energy. It is lazy by design. It gives you the minimum required for survival. If you want true cognitive performance, you need to negotiate with it. You need to show, through actions, not intentions, that it's worth spending more energy to think better. Now pay attention, because what comes next is one of the greatest performance levers humans have, and almost nobody uses it correctly. Everyone thinks focus is a matter of willpower, as if you needed to heroically fight the world, your phone, and your own mind. But focus isn't military discipline. Focus is engineering. When you understand this, working becomes less about enduring and more about building. Imagine your brain as an old radio. It works perfectly as long as you're tuned to the right frequency. The problem is that most people spin the dial in the dark with the volume maxed out and several stations overlapping. No one can hear anything like that. The mind doesn't fail from lack of ability. It fails from interference. So the right question is not, how do I concentrate? The right question is, how do I reduce noise? Before beginning any block of mental work, do something ridiculously simple, yet transformative. Write a single sentence. Just one. What concrete result do I want to exist at the end of this slice of time? This sentence is another cognitive laser. It cuts interference, sets boundaries, and tells your brain exactly where to aim its energy. Without this question, you enter a mental block like someone entering a dark room trying to tidy it up blindfolded. With it, you walk in, turning on the light. Now listen closely to the method. The block must be short. The human mind was not built for hours of uninterrupted focus. It was built for cycles, short bursts of deep intensity, followed by tiny recovery breaks. When you respect this, productivity doubles. When you ignore it, you end up with that fake sensation of, I worked all day, without producing anything real. Here comes the practical part. Remove interference before you start, not during, before. The brain is like a clever child. If you leave a toy in the corner of the room, it will go after it, so get it out of reach. No notifications, no random tabs, no objects screaming, touch me for 30 seconds. 30 seconds become 30 minutes before you even notice. Once that's done, enter the block with a micro action, the smallest possible. If you're going to study, read 2 lines. If you're going to create, write 1 sentence. If you're solving something complex, describe the problem in plain words. The brain hates starting, but loves continuing. The trick is to bypass inertia. Once the mind begins to roll, it does the rest on its own. And here comes the most overlooked part of all. Record your progress at the end. Just 2 lines. What did I create or understand? What is the next specific physical action? This prevents your brain from having to store loose bits. Every unresolved thought becomes a pirate radio station making noise inside your head. Writing them down silences the chaos. Do this and watch your cognitive performance explode. Not because you became disciplined, but because you finally treated focus as what it truly is, a mental architect, pure engineering. And engineering, when done right, works every day, even on bad days. Now imagine something that seems obvious, but almost no one does. You don't learn when you read. You learn when you reconstruct. Reading is like watching someone perform a magic trick. It looks beautiful, but you don't know how it works. Reconstruction is when you open the box, examine the springs, poke the false bottom, realize how you were fooled, and that's when you learn. The brain loves reconstruction because that's how it decides what's worth keeping. Pay attention now, because this is so powerful, it should be printed on the door of every classroom. The brain does not remember what you saw, it remembers what you explain. Explaining is the act that turns information into intellectual property. It's like borrowing a concept and returning it with your signature. That's what creates permanence. This is why, instead of reviewing by reading, you should review by reconstructing out loud, walking around your house, talking to the wall. Explaining to no one is one of the fastest ways to become someone who truly understands. Here's a simple method. Take any idea you think you learned. Now try to explain it using real objects in front of you. A cup, a spoon, a bottle, anything. If you can't, you didn't understand it. If you can, but only using pretty sentences, you also didn't understand it. True understanding is when the idea becomes a ridiculous little homemade skit and still works. This is where fast thinking is born. It's not mental speed, it's internal organization. When you reconstruct ideas repeatedly, your brain builds natural shortcuts, like small paved roads between concepts that used to be far apart. And when you need to think fast, those roads are already there. It's not magic, it's preventive maintenance. Here's another powerful trick. Spaced active recall. Nothing technical. Do it like this. One day after learning something, explain it without looking. 2 days later, explain it again. A week later, one more time. Each explanation is a brick in the wall of permanence. Memory doesn't like being caressed with rereading. It likes being challenged with effort. It grows exactly in the moment of, I don't quite remember. Now imagine a simple experiment. You learned something new today. Before bed, explain it to yourself as if you were 5 years old. Tomorrow, explain it as if you had to teach someone stubborn. The day after, explain it as if you were feeling lazy. Childlike simplicity, patient teaching, and creative laziness force the brain to reorganize the idea in 3 completely different ways. 3 different arrangements in the same mental drawer create deep order. And here's something that seems small, but changes everything. Ask questions to the knowledge that survived. After reconstructing, ask, what still feels confusing? What could I not demonstrate? What part would I repeat without truly understanding? This is where the gold is. The part you can't explain is exactly the part that transforms you once you finally understand it. It's the point of friction, and friction, when used well, becomes speed. Fast thinking isn't thinking quickly, it's thinking clearly. And clear thinking is the inevitable outcome of building, breaking, and rebuilding, without fuss, without jargon, without intellectual vanity. The knowledge that stays is the one you reconstruct. The knowledge that disappears is the one you only visited. Now imagine something curious. Logical thinking doesn't come from formulas, it comes from irritation. That's right, a mild, almost childish irritation with something that doesn't make sense. Logic begins when you look at something happening and think, wait, that doesn't add up. That's the instant the brain wakes up, opens the lab door, and turns on the light. The problem is that most people feel this discomfort and do what? Ignore it. Let it pass. Move on, and the mind goes back to sleep. Pay attention now. Logical thinking is the art of not ignoring small absurdities. Want to train logic every day? Ask why until reality gets uncomfortable. Not the dramatic why, but the curious one. The door jammed. Why? The elevator takes longer to go down than up. Why? Some days you wake up slower. Why? Every question is a little flashlight you shine into ignored corners of everyday life. Logic doesn't come from math. It comes from stubborn observation. Here's a brutally effective method. Make small predictions before acting. Before turning on the faucet, guess whether the water pressure will change. Before sending a message, try to predict the person's reaction. Before starting a task, estimate how long it will take. You don't need to get it right. In fact, being wrong is better, because every wrong guess is a soft electric shock to the brain saying, revise your internal models. Gradually, you get excellent at predicting, adjusting, measuring, correcting, which is exactly what logical thinking is. Now imagine a short mental experiment. You walk into a new environment. In 30 seconds, choose an object and ask, what's the cause and what's the effect here? Could be a chair, a lamp, a window. Cause and effect. That's simple. This 2-word exercise forces your mind to stop seeing the world as decoration and start seeing it as mechanism. Logical thinking is born from the habit of looking for hidden mechanisms behind ordinary things. Here's another absurdly simple exercise. Always look for the order of magnitude of things. You don't need exact numbers. Just ask, is it small, medium, or large? Fast or slow? Strong or weak? Questions like these strip away unnecessary detail and leave only structure. and logic is structure. When you practice this, your brain starts organizing the world by relationships, not by confusion. Now here's my favorite exercise, and probably the most transformative one. Replace bad metaphors with good ones. Every bad explanation is just a lazy metaphor. Every good explanation is a living metaphor. For example, if you want to understand why some people don't learn quickly, don't say they have difficulty. That means nothing. Say they're trying to fill a bucket full of holes. Now the metaphor reveals the logic of the problem. And when you practice this style of explanation, your reasoning gets sharp as a blade because you start searching for the hidden structure behind behaviors. Here's a daily practice that turns anyone into a better thinker. Before accepting something as true, try imagining a situation where it would be false. This trick destroys fragile certainties in seconds. This always works. Really? In what scenario would it fail? He never learns. Really? In what context would he have learned? This tiny act of mental rebellion creates logical flexibility, the opposite of rigid thinking, which is the number one enemy of intelligence. And finally, remember this. Logical thinking isn't about being serious. It's about being curious. It isn't about being cold. It's about being observant. It isn't about memorizing rules. It's about playing with the world like a child, taking apart an old toy just to see what's inside. Want to think better? Train small questions. Train imperfect predictions. Train simple metaphors. Train bold hypotheses. Train breaking the obvious apart. Logic appears not when you try to look intelligent, but when you refuse to accept weak explanations. If this video opens something inside your mind, hit the like button and comment below, "I'm ready to upgrade my thinking." That simple comment sends a message to your own brain. I'm not living on autopilot anymore. And while you're here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications because the next videos will go even deeper and you don't want to miss that. I'm going to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. You're living wrong. Back pause, let that land is not morally wrong, not ethically wrong, but functionally wrong. You're operating according to rules that don't serve you, rules you didn't choose, rules that were handed to you by people who probably didn't know what they were doing either. And the result, you're stuck, you're frustrated. You're doing okay, but deep down you know that you're capable of so much more. Here's the good news. You can change the rules you're living by. Right now? Today. And I'm going to show you exactly which rules to adopt. The same rules that transformed Richard Feynman from a regular kid in Queens into one of the most revolutionary minds of the 20th century. Rules that made him a Nobel Prize winner, yes, but more importantly, rules that made him happy, free, fully alive. These aren't complicated, they're not secret. Feynman lived them openly his entire life. But most people never notice them, and the few who do notice usually dismiss them as quirks of a genius, not principles anyone can follow. Lean in there, but here's the truth. These rules are exactly why Feynman became a genius in the first place, and they'll work for you too. So for the next 40 minutes, I'm going to break down Feynman's rules for living, and I'm going to challenge you to adopt them. Not all at once, not perfectly, but genuinely. Because if you do, I promise you, your life will change. Let's start with the first rule. And this one is going to make some of you angry. Heck, a bold statement. Rule number 1, never do anything just because you're supposed to. Feynman lived by this his entire life, and it drove people crazy. Let me tell you a story. It's 1965. Feynman wins the Nobel Prize. Huge honor, right? The pinnacle of scientific achievement. Most scientists spend their entire careers dreaming of this moment. And you know what Feynman's first reaction is? He considers turning it down. He can't let that shock land us seriously. He thinks about rejecting the Nobel Prize. Because receiving it means he has to go to Sweden. He has to give a formal lecture. He has to wear fancy clothes. He has to attend ceremonies and dinners and make small talk with royalty. And Feynman thinks, why? Why should I do all that? Just because it's expected. His wife convinces him to accept it. She points out that refusing would actually create more drama than accepting. But his instinct is to question whether he should do something just because everyone expects him to. I'll walk across stages. Now, most people hear this story and think Feynman was arrogant or contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. But that's not it at all. Feynman wasn't against traditions or honors.
He was against doing things without thinking about why. Let me give you a better example. This one shows the principle more clearly. Share this story. Feynman is teaching at Caltech, and there's this tradition where professors wear academic robes to graduation ceremonies. Everyone does it. It's formal. It's prestigious. It's what you're supposed to do. Feynman shows up in a regular suit. The administration is horrified. Professor Feynman, you need to wear your robes. Why? Because it's tradition. Because it's respectful. Because everyone else is wearing them. But what's the actual reason? What purpose does wearing this robe serve? He can't give him a good answer. So he doesn't wear the robe. As in possession now, you might think this is petty. Who cares about a robe? Just wear it and move on. But here's what Feynman understood. Every time you do something just because you're supposed to, you give up a little bit of your autonomy, a little bit of your judgment, a little bit of yourself. And those little bits add up. Pretty soon, you're living an entire life of things you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go to college. You're supposed to get a stable job. You're supposed to buy a house. You're supposed to work until you're 65. You're supposed to be serious. You're supposed to be professional. A fife get intensy, and one day you wake up and realize you've lived someone else's life. You've followed someone else's rules. You've become who you're supposed to be instead of who you actually are. Feynman refused to do that. He questioned everything. Not to be difficult, but to maintain his autonomy. And here's what's beautiful: when you stop doing things just because you're supposed to, you create space for things you actually want to do. Feynman didn't wear academic robes, but he did play the bongos at a nightclub. He did learn to draw. He did spend hours working on physics problems just for fun. He said no to obligations that didn't serve him so he could say yes to things that did. That's the first rule. Question every should in your life. Every supposed to, every expectation. And if you can't find a good reason for doing something other than it's what people do, seriously consider not doing it. There's our direct challenge. What are you doing right now just because you're supposed to? What obligations are you carrying that don't actually serve you? What expectations are you meeting that you never agreed to? Think about it. We'll come back to it. Now, let's talk about rule number 2. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. This is actually a direct Feynman quote, and it's probably his most important rule. Fox share this story with energy at a Feynman is at a conference, a prestigious physics conference. All the big names are there, and a famous physicist is presenting his work, impressive equations, complex theory. Everyone's nodding along, and Feynman raises his hand. I don't understand what you just said. The room goes quiet, because everyone else is pretending they understand. These are brilliant people, Nobel Prize winners, famous professors, leaders in their fields. And they're all fooling themselves into thinking they understand something they don't. But Feynman, he refuses to fool himself. He admits confusion. He asks for clarification. And you know what happens? 3 other people admit they didn't understand either. Then 5 more. Then suddenly everyone's asking questions. And it turns out the presenter hadn't actually explained it clearly. She paused. The difference. Everyone else was protecting their ego. Feynman was protecting his understanding. Everyone else was fooling themselves. Feynman wasn't. But get serious, and this is everywhere. Everywhere. We fool ourselves constantly. We fool ourselves that we understand things we don't. We fool ourselves that we're good at things we're not. We fool ourselves about why we do things. We fool ourselves about our motivations. We fool ourselves about our relationships. We fool ourselves because the truth is uncomfortable. And our ego doesn't like discomfort. But Feynman understood. Every time you fool yourself, you make your understanding of reality a little less accurate. And if your understanding of reality is inaccurate, your decisions will be bad. I give examples. You fool yourself that your job is fine when actually you're miserable. So you stay too long and waste years. You fool yourself that you understand your partner when actually you've stopped really listening. So your relationship deteriorates. You fool yourself that you're healthy when actually you're slowly destroying your body. So you don't change until it's too late. You fool yourself that you're working hard when actually you're just busy. So you never accomplish what matters. A point, the ability to not fool yourself, to see things as they actually are, not as you want them to be. This is maybe the most valuable skill you can develop. And Feynman had a method for this. He'd constantly check himself. He'd ask, am I fooling myself about this? What do I actually know versus what do I just believe? What's the evidence? He treated himself like a skeptical scientist examining a claim. And when he found gaps in his understanding, when he caught himself fooling himself, he'd admit it and course correct. Slow down. Make this actionable. So here's what I want you to do. Pick one area of your life where you might be fooling yourself. Maybe it's your career. You tell yourself you're building towards something, but are you really? Or are you just coasting? Maybe it's your health. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, but will you? Or is that just a comfortable lie? Maybe it's a relationship. You tell yourself it's fine, but is it? Or are you ignoring problems you don't want to face? Pick one thing and ask yourself, am I fooling myself about this? And here's the hard part. Actually answer honestly. Don't let your ego protect you. Look at the evidence. Look at your actions, not your intentions. That's rule number 2. Stop fooling yourself, especially stop fooling yourself. Now, rule number 3, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. Share this story. There's this famous moment where a student asks Feynman to explain why spin 1/2 particles obey Fermi-Dirac statistics. Standard quantum mechanics question. Any physics professor knows the answer. Feynman says, I'll prepare a freshman lecture on it. He goes away and tries to break it down into simple terms, and he realizes he can't. He can do the math. He knows the equations, but he doesn't understand it deeply enough to explain it simply. So he comes back and says, I couldn't do it. I couldn't reduce it to the freshman level, which means we don't really understand it. Pause. Think about that. A Nobel Prize winner admitting he doesn't really understand something, not because he lacks knowledge, but because he holds himself to a standard of understanding that goes beyond equations. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. If it get practical, this rule applies to everything, not just physics. You think you understand your business model? Explain it to your grandmother. If you can't, you don't really understand it. You think you understand why your relationship has problems. Explain it to a 12-year-old. If you resort to jargon or complexity, you don't really understand it. You think you understand what you want in life. Write it down in one clear paragraph. If you can't, you haven't thought it through. Hack direct statement. Complexity is often a mask for confusion. Jargon is often a hiding place for ignorance. If you truly understand something, you can make it clear. Feynman was famous for this. He could take the most complex physics concepts and explain them in ways that anyone could understand. Not because he dumbed them down, but because he understood them so deeply that he could find the simple truth underneath. And here's what's powerful. When you make this your standard, when you require yourself to explain things simply, you expose the gaps in your own understanding. You can't fake it anymore. You can't hide behind complexity, so you're forced to actually learn, actually understand, actually think. So challenge days, take something you think you understand, maybe something from your work or a decision you're trying to make, and explain it to someone outside your field. Watch where you struggle. That's where you don't really understand. Then go back and figure out those parts until you can explain them simply. That's rule number 3. Simple explanation is the test of true understanding. Now let's talk about rule number 4. Have no respect for authority, but respect for competence. If I tell this story with enthusiasm, so Feynman is at Los Alamos working on the atomic bomb. He's young, early 20s, and he's surrounded by the greatest physicists in the world. Niels Bohr, Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, giants of science. And Feynman argues with all of them, not because he's arrogant, but because he doesn't believe something just because someone famous says it. He evaluates the idea, not the credentials of the person saying it. There's this incredible moment where Niels Bohr, founder of quantum mechanics, wants to discuss an idea, and he asks who he should talk to. Someone suggests Feynman. Bohr says, that young man. Why him? The response, because he's the only one who's not afraid of you. He's the only one who'll tell you when you're wrong. Yeah, let that land, Jadon, and Bohr loves this. He wants to talk to Feynman precisely because Feynman won't defer to his authority. He'll engage with the actual ideas. This is the rule. Don't respect people just because they're in positions of authority. Respect them if they're competent. if they actually know what they're talking about. I get fired up. And this is so important in today's world. We're surrounded by people with impressive titles and credentials who don't actually know what they're doing. CEOs who don't understand their own businesses. Politicians who don't understand the policies they're advocating. Experts who memorize talking points but can't think critically. And we defer to them because of their position, not because of their competence. Right, point to audience. Hey, your boss might have authority over you, but that doesn't mean they're right. Question them. Evaluate their ideas on merit. That celebrity might have millions of followers, but that doesn't make them wise. Think critically about what they're saying. That expert might have fancy credentials, but that doesn't mean they understand. Ask them to explain their reasoning. Feynman questioned everyone. Not disrespectfully, but genuinely. Why do you believe that? What's the evidence? How do you know? And when he found someone who actually knew what they were talking about, who could defend their ideas with logic and evidence, he respected them deeply, regardless of their credentials or position. Soften slightly on now. This doesn't mean you should be contrarian for the sake of it. It doesn't mean you should assume everyone with authority is wrong. It means you should think for yourself. Evaluate ideas independently. Don't outsource your judgment to someone else's title. Eke action item. Think about who has authority in your life. Your boss, your doctor, your financial advisor, your pastor, the news anchors you watch. Are you respecting them because they've proven their competence, or just because of their position? Start asking, how do they know this? What's the reasoning? Does this actually make sense? That's rule number 4. Respect competence, not authority. Let's move to rule number 5. Stay curious like you're going to die tomorrow. If I share this with passion, Feynman is in his 70s. He's accomplished everything, Nobel Prize, revolutionary discoveries, famous books, successful career. He's earned the right to coast, to relax, to rest on his achievements. Instead, he's learning about computing. He's exploring biology. He's investigating quantum computing. He's still asking why. About everything. A colleague asks him, why are you still working so hard? You've already proven everything you need to prove. And Feynman looks at him like he's crazy. I'm not working hard. I'm playing. I'm curious. Why would I stop? Our slow down piece of this is the rule that Feynman lived by more than any other. Never lose your curiosity. Never stop wondering. Never stop exploring. Most people lose their curiosity somewhere in their 20s. They figure out how things work, or at least they think they do, and they stop asking questions. They settle into routines. They accept explanations without questioning them. They stop playing, and then they wonder why life feels empty. Direct Feynman never stopped being curious about everything. Physics, yes, but also biology, art, music, psychology, languages, magic tricks, safe-cracking, whatever caught his attention. He'd see something interesting and immediately wonder, how does that work? Why is it that way? What would happen if I changed this? And that curiosity kept him young. Not physically, he still got old and sick and eventually died. But mentally, spiritually, he was young until the very end. Because curiosity is the antidote to aging. Not aging of the body, but aging of the mind. That feeling of being old, tired, done, that comes from losing curiosity, not from years passing. It paints the picture, when you're curious, every day is interesting. Every conversation is an opportunity. Every experience is a chance to learn something new. When you're not curious, every day is the same. Every conversation is predictable. Every experience is just another thing to get through. Which life do you want? She challenged directly. Here's what I want you to do. Think about something you see every day but never really think about. Maybe it's how your phone works. Maybe it's why traffic patterns form the way they do. Maybe it's how your body actually digests food. Maybe it's why people fall in love. Pick something and get genuinely curious about it. Not because it's useful. Not because you'll impress someone with the knowledge, but just because it's interesting. Spend an hour learning about it, reading about it, thinking about it, wondering about it, and notice how you feel. Notice if your brain wakes up a little. Notice if you feel more engaged with the world. That's what curiosity does. That's rule number 5. Stay curious about everything always. Now, rule number 6, and this one's controversial. Don't take yourself too seriously. Tell this with humor. Feynman wins the Nobel Prize. Huge honor. And someone asks him at a press conference, how does it feel to win the most prestigious award in science? And Feynman says, I don't know. I don't care about awards. I won the real prize. I got to discover something true about the universe. The medal is just a bonus. Flaf, the reporters don't know what to do with this, because everyone else treats the Nobel Prize like it's the meaning of life. But Feynman, he treats it like a fun side effect of doing work he enjoyed. He didn't take himself seriously, even when everyone else wanted to put him on a pedestal. Share more examples, and he'd perform in a ballet, because a friend asked and he thought it would be fun. A world-famous physicist. Dancing on stage in tights. He'd play bongos at a strip club because he enjoyed the rhythm and didn't care what people thought. He'd draw nudes in an art class under a fake name because he wanted to learn and didn't want people treating him like the famous Professor Feynman. Exceptio pointer. This wasn't lack of ambition. This wasn't lack of seriousness about his work. Feynman was incredibly serious about physics, about truth, about understanding. But he wasn't serious about his image, his reputation, his status, and that freedom, the freedom to not worry about looking stupid or undignified or weird, that gave him permission to explore anything that interested him. Foster gets serious for a moment. Most people trap themselves with self-importance. They become so concerned with their image, their reputation, their status, that they stop taking risks, they stop exploring, they stop playing. They're terrified of looking foolish, so they never try anything new. They're worried about dignity, so they never have fun. They're protecting their status, so they never do anything interesting. Lean in he. And the result, they become boring, safe, predictable, small. Feynman refused to be small. He'd rather be interesting than impressive. He'd rather be real than respectable. And paradoxically, that's what made him impressive and respectable. Action, what are you not doing because you're worried about how to look? What are you avoiding because it might make you seem silly or undignified? Do that thing. Seriously, do it. Take the dance class. Learn the weird hobby. Ask the stupid question. Try the thing that might make you look foolish. Because the only way to stay interesting, to yourself and to others, is to stop taking yourself so seriously. That's rule number 6. Hold your work to high standards, but hold yourself lightly. Rule number 7, figure it out from first principles. Tell the story, Feynman is in college. His classmates are all memorizing formulas, studying past exams, preparing for tests the way everyone prepares for tests. Feynman doesn't memorize anything. When a problem comes up, he derives what he needs from basic principles, from the ground up. His friends think he's crazy. Why don't you just memorize the formulas like everyone else? It's faster. But Feynman understands something they don't. When you derive from first principles, you understand. When you memorize, you're just storing information. Explain first principles thinking means breaking something down to its most basic truths and building up from there. It means not accepting what everyone else accepts. It means figuring things out for yourself. Most people reason by analogy. They see how something works in one context and apply it to another context. They follow established methods. They do what worked before. And that's fine for routine problems. But it's useless for breakthrough thinking. Give examples. Everyone said rockets had to be expensive, because they've always been expensive. Elon Musk went to first principles. What's the actual material cost of a rocket? Turns out it's a tiny fraction of what they were charging. So he built SpaceX. Everyone said taxes are regulated, and that's how it has to be. The Uber founders went to first principles. What's the actual problem we're solving? People need rides. People have cars. Connect them directly. Uber. Everyone said hotels are how you travel. Airbnb went to first principles. People need a place to stay. People have extra rooms. Connect them. Airbnb. First principles thinking is how innovation happens. It's how you break free from conventional wisdom and find better solutions. And Feynman applied this to everything, not just physics. Everything. When he wanted to understand biology, he didn't just read biology textbooks. He went to first principles. What's actually happening at the molecular level? How do these chemical processes work? Can I understand this through physics? Challenge, think about a problem you're facing. Any problem, work, relationships, health, whatever. Now ask yourself, am I approaching this based on how it's supposed to be done? Or am I thinking from first principles? Strip away all the assumptions, all the conventional wisdom, but that's how it's always been done. What's the actual problem? What are the basic truths? What are the constraints that actually matter versus the ones people just accept? Build up from there. That's rule number 7. Don't accept conventional wisdom. Figure it out from first principles. Rule number 8, teach everything you learn. Or share this. Feynman becomes famous for his lectures. The Feynman lectures on physics are legendary. Undergraduates would pack the lecture hall just to hear him explain things. And people ask him, "Why do you spend so much time on teaching? You could be doing more research, more important work." And Feynman says something interesting. He says, "Teaching isn't something I do instead of research. Teaching is how I do research. When I have to explain something clearly, I understand it better myself." Usher explained the principle. This is profound. Most people think teaching is about transferring knowledge from expert to novice. But that's not how it works. Teaching forces you to clarify your own thinking, to find the gaps in your understanding, to organize information in a logical way. When you try to explain something to someone else, especially someone who knows nothing about the topic, you quickly discover what you don't actually understand. However, give personal example of I've experienced this constantly. I'll think I understand something, then I try to explain it, and I realize I know the buzzwords, but I don't actually get it, so I go back, I figure it out, I simplify it. And in the process of preparing to teach it, I learn it properly for the first time. If make it actionable, here's the rule: every time you learn something, teach it to someone. Write about it, explain it to a friend, make a video about it, start a blog. Doesn't matter, just externalize it. Get it out of your head and into a form where you have to make it clear. This does 2 things. First, it forces you to actually learn it properly. Second, it helps someone else. Win-win. Feynman taught everything. Physics, obviously. But also how to think, how to question, how to approach problems. And in teaching these things, he mastered them himself. What have you learned recently? Anything, a skill, an insight, a piece of knowledge. Teach it to someone this week. Explain it, write it down, make it clear. You'll be amazed how much clearer it becomes in your own mind. That's rule number 8. Teaching isn't separate from learning. It's the highest form of learning. Rule number 9, and we're getting close to the end, to play more. Way more. Tell the story with energy. Feynman wins the Nobel Prize, and then he gets depressed, seriously depressed. Why? Because physics stopped being fun. It became about publishing papers, about reputation, about being taken seriously, about living up to expectations. The play was gone. So one day, he's in the cafeteria at Caltech, and he sees a student throw a plate in the air, and the plate wobbles as it spins. And Feynman thinks, that's interesting. I wonder what the relationship is between the wobble and the spin. So he works it out, not because anyone asked him to, not because it'll lead anywhere, just because it's fun. Just because he's curious, he's playing. Siver slowed down, and from that play, from that willingness to work on something pointless just because it was interesting, came some of his most important work on quantum electrodynamics. The Nobel Prize work started as play. Make the point clear. This is the rule most people violate. We think play is for children. We think adults should be serious, productive, focused. But here's what Feynman understood: play is where creativity lives. Play is where innovation happens. Play is where breakthroughs come from. When you're playing, you're not worried about being wrong. You're not worried about wasting time. You're not worried about productivity. You're just exploring, experimenting, trying things, having fun. And that freedom, that lack of pressure, that's when your brain does its best work. Get passionate. Think about when you've had your best ideas. I bet they didn't come when you were grinding. They came in the shower, on a walk, playing around with something, when you gave your brain permission to wander. That's not despite the lack of focus. That's because of it. Your brain needs room to play. Feynman built play into his life deliberately. Bongos, drawing, safe-cracking, physics problems just for fun. He gave himself permission to be unproductive, to waste time on interesting things. And paradoxically, that made him incredibly productive, because he was always fresh, always interested, always engaged. For challenge, what would you do if productivity didn't matter? If you had a whole day with no obligations, no expectations, no need to accomplish anything, what would you play with? Do that thing. This week, give yourself permission to play, even just for an hour. And notice what happens to your energy, your creativity, your joy. That's rule number 9. Play isn't a luxury, it's essential. And finally, rule number 10. Live by your own scorecard, not the world's. Tell this final story near the end of his life. Feynman is asked what he's most proud of. What achievement matters most? People expect him to say the Nobel Prize, or his work on the atomic bomb, or his revolutionary contributions to physics. He says, I'm proud that I got to satisfy my curiosity. I'm proud that I got to play with ideas. I'm proud that I understood things. Let that sink in. Fees is not the awards, not the recognition, not the fame, just the experience of being curious and understanding things. He measured his life by his own standards, not the world's standards. Principally explained, the world wants you to measure yourself by external metrics, money, status, titles, followers, awards, comparison to others. And if you accept those metrics, you'll never be satisfied, because there's always someone richer, more successful, more famous. But if you define your own metrics, your own scorecard, you can actually win. Our share examples of Feynman didn't care about publishing more papers than other physicists. He cared about understanding. He didn't care about being more famous. He cared about being curious. He didn't care about impressing people. He cared about being genuine. Those were his metrics, and by his metrics, he was incredibly successful. Direct addressee, what are your metrics? Not what you think they should be, not what society tells you they should be, but what actually matters to you. Maybe it's not money, maybe it's freedom, or creativity, or time with family, or making something beautiful, or helping people, or understanding. Whatever it is, that's your scorecard. Measure yourself by that, not by what everyone else is measuring. Because here's the truth, you only get one life, one chance to live according to your own values or someone else's. Feynman chose his own, and he died happy, fulfilled, content with the life he'd lived. Most people die with regrets, not because they didn't achieve enough by the world's standards, but because they never lived by their own. Final challenges. So here's what I want you to do right now. Before you leave this room, before you forget, write down which of these 10 rules resonates most with you. Which one, if you really adopted it, would change your life? Maybe it's stop doing things you're supposed to. Maybe it's stop fooling yourself. Maybe it's stay curious. Maybe it's play more. Pick one, just one, and commit to living by it for the next month. Not perfectly, not completely, just genuinely trying, and watch what happens. Slow down, get emotional. These aren't complicated rules. They're not secret wisdom. They're just principles that Feynman lived by. Principles that made him not just successful by the world's standards, but happy by his own standards. And that's what matters, isn't it? Not just achieving things, but actually enjoying the life you're living, actually being yourself, actually feeling alive. That's what these rules give you. Not success necessarily, though success often follows, but something better than success: authenticity, freedom, joy, the freedom to think for yourself, the joy of following your curiosity, the authenticity of living according to your own values. I walked to center stage. Feynman once said, I learned very early the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. Most people spend their lives collecting the names, the titles, the credentials. Feynman spent his life knowing things, understanding things, being things. Quick point to audience. Which one do you want to be? Someone who looks successful, or someone who actually is living the life they want to live? Someone who has achieved by the world's standards, or someone who's satisfied by their own standards? Someone who played the game, or someone who made up their own game and won it? Final pause. Adopt these rules, not all at once, not perfectly, but start. Start questioning what you're supposed to do. Start refusing to fool yourself. Start explaining things simply. Start respecting competence over authority. Start staying curious. Start taking yourself less seriously. Start thinking from first principles. Start teaching what you learn. Start playing more. Start living by your own scorecard. A smile as your life will change, I promise you. Not overnight, but gradually, inevitably, profoundly. You'll become more yourself, more alive, more free, like Feynman. Thank you. And hey, if these rules resonated with you, if you're ready to start living differently, do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring the principles, habits, and philosophies that made Feynman extraordinary. And we're showing how you can apply them to your own life starting today. Join us. Let's adopt these rules together. Let's change our lives together. See you in the next one.
If you close your eyes and picture energy, you probably imagine some kind of glowing blue fluid, or a crackling lightning bolt, or maybe a shimmering aura that flows from a battery into a light bulb. You think of it as a stuff, a substance, a blob of something that moves from place to place. I hate to be the one to ruin the magic trick, but that is completely wrong. In physics, today, right now, we have no knowledge of what energy is. We do not have a picture that energy comes in little blobs of a definite amount. It is not a fluid, it is not a gas, it is not a ghost inside the machine. So what is it? It is a number. That's it. It is a mathematical quantity. It is an abstract bookkeeping rule that nature, for some reason, decides to obey. Here is the situation. There is a fact, or if you wish, a law, governing all natural phenomena that are known to date. There is no known exception to this law. It is exact so far as we know. We call it the conservation of energy. It states that there is a certain numerical quantity, which we call energy, that does not change in the manifold changes which nature undergoes. That is a most abstract idea, because it is a mathematical principle. It says that there is a numerical quantity which does not change when something happens. It is not a description of a mechanism or anything concrete. It is just a strange fact that we can calculate some number, and when we finish watching nature go through her tricks and calculate the number again, it is the same. Imagine a bishop on a chessboard. If you look at the red squares, the bishop is always on a red square. You can move it, you can dance it around, you can distract it, but if you count the number of bishops on red squares, that number is conserved. Energy is like that. It is a rule of the game, not a piece on the board. To understand this, we have to stop thinking like physicists and start thinking like a mother dealing with a very mischievous child. Imagine a child. Let's call him Dennis, the menace. Dennis has a set of blocks. These blocks are absolutely indestructible and cannot be divided into pieces. Each is the same as the other. Let us suppose that he has 28 blocks. His mother puts him with his 28 blocks into a room at the beginning of the day. At the end of the day, being curious, she counts the blocks very carefully. She discovers a phenomenal law. No matter what he does with the blocks, there are always 28 remaining. This continues for a number of days, until one day there are only 27 blocks. Now, does she assume the law of conservation of blocks is broken? No. She investigates. A little looking around shows that there is one under the rug. She must look everywhere to be sure that the number of blocks has not changed. One day, however, the number appears to change. There are only 26 blocks. Careful investigation indicates that the window was open, and upon looking outside, the other 2 blocks are found. The accounting works. The number is saved. Another day, careful count indicates that there are 30 blocks. This causes considerable consternation until it is realized that a neighbor boy came to visit, bringing his blocks with him, and he left a few at Dennis's house. After she has disposed of the extra blocks, she closes the window, does not let the neighbor in, and then everything is going along all right, until one time she counts and finds only 25 blocks. This is where it gets interesting. There is a box in the room, a toy box, and the mother goes to open the toy box, but the boy screams and says she is not allowed to open it. So now she has a problem. She has 25 visible blocks. She is missing 3. She suspects they are in the box, but she cannot see them. The energy is hidden. Being extremely curious and somewhat ingenious, she invents a scheme. She knows that a block weighs 3 ounces, so she weighs the box at a time when she sees 28 blocks, and it weighs 16 ounces. The next time she wishes to check, she weighs the box again, subtracts 16 ounces, and divides by 3. She discovers a formula. The number of blocks seen plus the weight of the box minus 16 ounces divided by 3 ounces equals a constant. In the graduate, there then appear to be some new deviations. Careful study indicates that the dirty water in the bathtub is changing its level. The child is throwing blocks into the water, and she cannot see them because it is so dirty. But she can find out how many blocks are in the water by adding another term to her formula. Since the original height of the water was 6 inches, and each block raises the water 1/4 of an inch, this new formula would be the number of blocks seen plus the weight calculation of the box, plus the height of the water minus 6 inches divided by a 1/4 inch equals the constant, 28. In the gradual increase in the complexity of her world, she finds a whole series of terms representing ways of calculating how many blocks are in places where she is not allowed to look. As a result, she finds a complex formula, a quantity which has to be computed, which always stays the same in her situation. Now, what is the analogy of this to the conservation of energy? The most remarkable aspect that must be abstracted from this picture is that there are no blocks. Take away the first terms in our equations, and we find ourselves calculating more or less abstract things. The analogy has the following points. First, when we are calculating the energy, sometimes some of it leaves the system and goes away, or sometimes some comes in. In order to verify the conservation of energy, we must be careful that we have not put any in or taken any out. Second, the energy has a large number of different forms, and there is a formula for each one. These are gravitational energy, kinetic energy, heat energy, elastic energy, electrical energy, chemical energy, radiant energy, nuclear energy, mass energy. If we total up the formulas for each of these contributions, it will not change except for energy going in and out. But remember, there are no blocks. We don't know what the mechanism is. We just know that if we take the speed of a car and square it and multiply by the mass and divide by 2, we get a number. And if we take the height of a rock and multiply by the weight, we get another number. And if we measure the temperature of a radiator, we get another number. And when we add all these seemingly unrelated numbers together, the total stays constant. It is an abstract thing in that it does not tell us the mechanism or the reasons for the various formulas. It just works. Conservation of energy can be understood only if we have the formula for all of its forms. Let's start with the simplest one, gravitational energy near the surface of the Earth. I wish to derive this formula in a way which has nothing to do with history, but is simply a line of reasoning to give you an illustration of the remarkable fact that a great deal about nature can be extracted from a few facts and close reasoning. Consider weightlifting machines, machines which have the property that they lift one weight by lowering another. Let us also make a hypothesis that there is no such thing as perpetual motion with these weightlifting machines. That is, if we have lifted and lowered a lot of weights and restored the machine to the original condition, we find that the net result is to have lifted a weight. Then we have a perpetual motion machine because we can use that lifted weight to run something else. We assume this is impossible. If you could build a machine that lifts a heavy weight by dropping a light weight a short distance and then resets itself without using fuel, you would be a billionaire. But nature is stingy. She doesn't allow it. Imagine a very simple weightlifting machine, a lever or a pulley. This machine lifts weights 3 units strong. We place 3 units on one balance pan and 1 unit on the other. However, in order to get it actually to work, we must lift the little weight off the left pan. On the other hand, we could lift the 1 unit weight by lowering the 3 unit weight, if we cheat a little by lifting a little weight off the other pan.
Of course, we realize that with any actual lifting machine, we must add a little extra to get it to run. This we disregard temporarily. Ideal machines, although they do not exist, do not require anything extra. A machine that we actually use can be, in a sense, almost reversible. That is, if it will lift the weight of 3 by lowering a weight of 1, then it will also lift nearly the weight of 1, the same amount, by lowering the weight of 3. We imagine that there are 2 classes of machines, those that are not reversible, which includes all real machines, and those that are reversible, which of course are actually not attainable, no matter how careful we may be in our design of bearings and levers. We suppose, however, that there is such a thing, a reversible machine, which lowers 1 unit of weight by 1 unit of distance, and at the same time lifts a 3 unit weight. Call this reversible machine, Machine A. Suppose this particular reversible machine lifts the 3 unit weight a distance x. Then suppose we have another machine, Machine B, which is not necessarily reversible, which also lowers a unit weight a unit distance, but which lifts 3 units a distance y, we can now prove that y is not higher than x. That is, it is impossible to build a machine that will lift a weight any higher than it will be lifted by a reversible machine. Let us see why. Let us suppose that y were higher than x. We take a 1 unit weight and lower it 1 unit height with machine B, and that lifts the 3 unit weight up a distance y. Then we could lower the weight from y to x, obtaining free power, and use the reversible machine A running backwards to lower the 3 unit weight a distance x and lift the 1 unit weight by 1 unit height. This will put the 1 unit weight back where it was before and leave both machines ready to be used again. We would therefore have perpetual motion if y were higher than x, which we assumed was impossible. With those assumptions, we thus deduce that y is not higher than x, so that of all machines that can be designed, the reversible machine is the best. We can also see that all reversible machines must lift to exactly the same height. This is a very remarkable observation, because it permits us to analyze the height to which different machines are going to lift something without looking at the interior mechanism. We know at once that if somebody makes an enormously elaborate series of levers that lift 3 units a certain distance by lowering 1 unit by 1 unit distance, and we compare it with a simple lever which does the same thing and is fundamentally reversible, his machine will lift it no higher. So, what is this distance, x? Suppose we have a reversible machine which is going to lift this distance x, 3 for 1. We can prove by logic alone that x must be 1/3 of a foot. The generalization is clear. 1 pound falls a certain distance in operating a reversible machine, then the machine can lift a certain amount of pounds, this distance divided by that amount. Another way of putting the result is that 3 pounds times the height lifted, which in our problem was x, is equal to 1 pound times the distance lowered, which is 1 foot. If we take all the weights and multiply them by the heights at which they are now, above the floor, let the machine operate, and then multiply all the weights by all the heights again, there will be no change. We call the sum of the weights times the heights gravitational potential energy, the energy which an object has because of its relationship in space relative to the Earth. The formula for gravitational energy, then, so long as we are not too far from the Earth, is the weight times the height. It is a very beautiful line of reasoning. The only problem is that perhaps it is not true. After all, nature does not have to go along with our reasoning. For example, perhaps perpetual motion is, in fact, possible. Some of the assumptions may be wrong, or we may have made a mistake in reasoning, so it is always necessary to check. It turns out experimentally, in fact, to be true. The general name of energy, which has to do with location relative to something else, is called potential energy. In this particular case, of course, we call it gravitational potential energy. If it is a question of electrical forces against which we are working, instead of gravitational forces, if we are lifting charges away from other charges with a lot of levers, then the energy content is called electrical potential energy. The general principle is that the change in the energy is the force times the distance that the force is pushed. But this is just the beginning. We have only talked about statics, things standing still. What happens when things move? Where does the potential energy go when a pendulum swings down to the bottom? The gravitational energy disappears when it is down at the bottom. Nevertheless, it will climb up again. The gravitational energy must have gone into another form. Evidently, it is by virtue of its motion that it is able to climb up again. So we have the conversion of gravitational energy into some other form when it reaches the bottom. We call this kinetic energy. And just like with the blocks, we need a formula for it. We need to find where the blocks are hiding when the object is moving. And trust me, the formula for motion is where things start to get really messy. We left off with a nice, tidy picture of the universe. We had weights and heights. We had reversible machines. We established that if you lift the rock, you are storing a number, gravitational potential energy. But the universe refuses to sit still. What happens when you drop the rock? As it falls, it loses height. The gravitational potential energy is vanishing. The number on our balance sheet is dropping towards zero. If the law of conservation of energy is real, if those indestructible blocks haven't simply ceased to exist, they must have gone somewhere. They must be hiding. Look at the rock just before it hits the ground. It has no height left, but it has something else. It has speed. It has motion. If we attach that moving rock to a rope and a pulley system, its motion can pull another weight up. It has the capacity to do work. The energy didn't disappear. It shape-shifted. It turned into kinetic energy. Now we need a formula for this. We need to know how many blocks are hidden in a moving object. Recall our arguments about reversible machines. We can see that the motion at the bottom must correspond to a quantity of energy that permits the object to rise back to a certain height. It doesn't matter how it got that speed, whether it fell from a cliff, was shot from a cannon, or was pushed by a rocket. Motion is motion. When we do the math, we find a specific rule. To find the kinetic energy, you take the weight of the object, multiply it by the square of its velocity, and divide by a constant related to gravity. Notice that's squared. That is critical. If a car goes twice as fast, it doesn't have twice the energy, it has 4 times the energy. This is why high-speed impacts are so much more violent than low-speed ones. The number of hidden blocks explodes as you go faster. So now we have 2 places to hide our blocks. In height, potential, and in speed, kinetic. Is that it? Is the universe just things going up and down and fast and slow? Of course not. Nature is far more devious than that. Consider a spring. If you pull down on a spring, you are doing work. You are sweating, pulling against the metal. You hold it there. The spring isn't moving, so there is no kinetic energy. It hasn't changed height, so there is no gravitational energy. Yet you know there is energy there. If you let go, it snaps back. It can lift weights. It can smack you in the face. We have to invent a new term, elastic potential energy. This is the energy stored in the tension of the spring. But wait, there is a problem, a flaw in our beautiful reversible machine logic. We cheated. Throughout this entire explanation, we have been assuming that machines go on forever. We assume that a pendulum swings back up to exactly the same height it started from. We assume the spring bounces forever.
But you know that's a lie. If you swing a pendulum, eventually it stops. If you bounce a spring, eventually it settles down. When the pendulum stops, it has no height. It has no speed. The potential energy is zero. The kinetic energy is zero. The numbers are gone. Did the blocks disappear? Did nature finally break the law? Where did the energy go?
This brings us to the most brilliant hiding spot of all, heat. Inside the spring, inside the pendulum, inside the air they move through, there are crystals and molecules made of billions of atoms. When things move on a large scale, like a car rolling or a pendulum swinging, we try to be very delicate. But nature is messy. There is friction. There is bumping. As the motion slows down, the visible kinetic energy disappears, but the invisible kinetic energy appears. The atoms inside the material start to jiggle. They start to wiggle in a random, confused manner. We lose track of the energy on the macroscopic scale, but it is still there. If you put a sensitive thermometer on a spring that has just stopped bouncing, you will find it is warmer. That warmth is the energy. Heat energy is not a new thing. It is just kinetic energy, internal motion, hidden in the chaos of the crowd. This is a profound realization. It means that what we call heat is just the kinetic energy of atoms that are too small to see. The blocks didn't vanish. They just got chopped up into dust and scattered among the atoms. But if you could count the motion of every single atom, the total number would still be exactly the same. Once you accept that energy can hide in the jiggling of atoms, you start to see it everywhere. There is electrical energy. This has to do with pushing and pulling electric charges. There is radiant energy. This is light. We know light carries energy. It heats up the pavement. It burns your skin.
Light is just a wiggling in the electromagnetic field. There is chemical energy. This is the energy released when gasoline burns or when you digest food. But what is it really? It is just the electrical energy of atoms attracting and repelling each other. It's the same rules, just deep inside the chemistry. There is nuclear energy. This is the energy involved with the arrangement of particles inside the nucleus of an atom. We have formulas for it, but honestly, we don't fully understand the fundamental laws of it yet. And finally, there is the monster, the one discovered by Einstein, mass energy. It turns out that an object has energy simply from its sheer existence, even if it is sitting still at absolute zero temperature with no height and no electric charge. It has energy because it has mass. If you take a positron and an electron and you bring them together, they disappear, they annihilate, and out comes radiant energy, light. You can calculate exactly how much. The formula is the mass times the speed of light squared. This means mass and energy are the same thing. Mass is just a very, very dense way of storing the blocks. So, where does this leave us? We have a law, conservation of energy, that seems to be absolutely true. We check it in steam engines, in stars, in atoms, and in galaxies. The number always balances. The blocks are always found, whether under the rug, in the toy box, or in the jiggling of atoms. But remember what I said at the beginning. We don't know what energy is. We do not understand energy as counting little blobs. It is a mathematical quantity. It is abstract, and it gets stranger. In quantum mechanics, we learned that this conservation law is actually related to time. It turns out that conservation of energy is just the physicist's way of saying the laws of physics don't change depending on what time it is. If you do an experiment today and you do it again tomorrow, nature behaves the same way. That symmetry in time is what causes energy to be conserved. Energy is not a substance. It is the shadow cast by the consistency of reality. Before we finish, I have to give you a warning. I told you that energy is conserved. That implies we can never run out of it. So why do we worry about saving energy? Why do we pay electric bills? Because while energy is conserved, useful energy is not. There is a lot of jiggling around in the atoms of the sea. The ocean has a massive amount of heat energy, but you can't get those atoms to herd together and drive a ship unless you have a temperature difference, unless you take energy from somewhere else.
Nature doesn't care about us. She has conservation of energy, but she spends it in all directions. The sun liberates massive amounts of energy, but only a tiny fraction, 1 part in 2 billion, falls on the earth. The rest is lost to the void. Our job, the job of the physicist and the engineer, is to figure out how to catch those blocks before they get hidden under the rug of entropy. We get energy from the sun, from rain, which comes from the sun, from coal, which is stored sunlight, and from uranium. If we can figure out how to control thermonuclear reactions, fusion, we could get enough energy from 10 quarts of water per second to power the entire United States. It can be done. The blocks are there. We just need to be smart enough to find them. So the next time someone talks about energy, don't picture a glowing blue fluid. Picture a child hiding blocks. Picture a number that refuses to change. And remember that even though we can't touch it, and we don't really know what it is the one thing in this universe that we can count on.